So, if you're looking to communicate with 50 plus women in battleground states, they're not going to be on TikTok or Twitter, right? But they are going to be on Facebook and possibly Instagram. But if you're looking to register Gen Zs and millennials, they're not going to be on Pinterest, but they are going to be on TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, possibly. So, I think that the more that you approach what networks you're communicating on from a strategic way, based on your audiences and the messages and the issues you're trying to affect, the better. But all these places are places where you can get messages out, right?
What's the logic behind not just focusing and driving traffic to just one link and having your volunteers and your followers just go to one platform?
Because if you think about social media, so think about like the campaign as an island, and that island has like the actions that campaign needs folks to do, and usually that island's hosted on the website, a website, right? You can register to vote, you can donate, you can sign up to volunteer. Everything else around that is like acquisition and content to drive people to those actions. So, you're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok and what is the Twitch? You're on all these things, not because these are the most important places to be for any given conversation, but because it's a way that folks can discover you, discover your campaign, discover your content, and then be pulled into that funnel to become supporters, to donate, to volunteer, etc. So, it's really about, understanding there are lots of places to spread your message where there's going to be different audiences and with different types of content and different types of issues are going to matter. But you should be on those platforms talking to those audiences if they're part of your target. So, that's why campaigns, I always say that, when I teach sort of social media 101 to nonprofits, that you should pick your social media channels based on the audiences and issues that you're trying to communicate with, and you should make sure that you use them. So I wouldn't say you need to be on every channel, right? Because if you have a Pinterest account and you never use it, it actually makes your campaign look like there isn't a lot going on, which isn't something a message you want to send out. So, pick the places you want to have your message, and then make sure you're keeping them updated and interesting, and you're engaged in those channels.
No, that makes a lot of sense. A more focused question relating to like the influencers that you guys work with. How do you see influencers, that they're sharing their platforms with Main Street One? How do they engage on these political issues? How do you ask them questions to engage on political issues in such a polarized environment?
Well, I think this is one of the reasons why, it's always been so hard to get good user-generated content, right? So when I worked at Blue State, and it was all about UGC campaigns, getting people to share their stories. People don't want to be personal and authentic and talk about issues that are really complex and hard on social media in ways that are personal. And at Main Street One, that's what we ask people to do. So it's difficult, right? And we might have to engage, a couple hundred people on a very specific issue before we find a handful of people who, are going to make sense for the campaign. So that, I think that it is a process of finding people that have already sort of expressed an affinity or something that makes us think they'd be good to participate, who has opted in to have these conversations, and then basically, reaching out to them as people. Because we have a big team of organizers. That's one of the things that makes us different from a lot of creator shop, as we approach this really as an organizing challenge, and find these people and have a conversation with them. I mean, sometimes, especially with our senior network, I know that we've had digital relational organizers actually get on the phone and interview people. So this is, this can be a very personal process to get people to tell their stories online, and that's why they're, that's why they receive payment for it.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the challenges that social media as a whole is confronting, especially as we narrow down into this. At the time that we're recording this, it's 4 weeks, So at Main Street One, how do you define disinformation? I'll follow up to that is like when there's conflicting claims on facts, how do you guys deal with that?
So that's a great question. So, there's disinformation and there's misinformation, and the difference between the two is it intentionally misleading or not, right? But for the work that we do, whether it or is disinfo or misinfo, is irrelevant. And basically, we define disinformation as something that is factually untrue, that is damaging to the discourse. So there are a lot of conversations and sort of kooky things happening on the internet, but a lot of those conversations don't actually affect the issues and affect the campaigns. And one of the cool things that we can do at Main Street One is we can actually look at content, conversations, and the tales that they have to see if they're having impact in the discourse. Because one of the dangers in confronting disinformation is that you actually amplify what you're trying to push back against. So that's the one thing that we do is we understand if, is this worth responding to? Is it a conversation that's having effect on the discourse? And the second thing is we really believe in the idea of putting forward alternative narratives. So if there's disinformation around vaccines cause autism, vaccines are bad for kids, the alternative narrative that we would put out is positive content of parents and doctors and nurses talking about the benefits of their kids getting vaccines, right? So it is less about amplifying the disinfo from the vaccine folks, and it's more about creating a conversation and an alternative narrative that is worth amplifying, sharing, liking, et cetera, right? Because especially the vaccine conversation, that's a good one to talk about, because if you look at the scale of the conversation around vaccines, the vast majority of the conversation is disinformation, and that is a real problem that needs to be a counter conversation that's based on the science.
Wow, so your data at Main Street One is implying that the majority of people talking about vaccines online is actually false information.
Yeah, both the Main Street One analysis shows that, but there's also peer-reviewed studies that have been published on that specific topic in social media over the years. So it is especially a dangerous, risky topic. And as we enter the vaccine period, knock on wood, for coronavirus in the spring, we're going to have to make sure that as a society, we're going to have to make sure that there is not, the conversation is not mostly disinfo. That would be a real disservice to people.
How is disinformation making an impact in the electoral setting of 2021?
So I think a great example, and one that we've looked at for multiple clients over the last year or so, is vote by mail and early voting, and the president's relentless attacks on vote by mail, which is disinformation to the point that Twitter and Facebook have flagged specific posts of the president's as election disinformation. So that has been something we've been listening to, we've been understanding, and we've been, for multiple clients, recruiting people across the country in key states to talk about the safety of voting, the importance of voting, that your vote is secure. And I think that is a great example of us being able to look and understand what communities are being affected by this conversation, and how do we stand up responses, with folks who are going to be credible messengers to the audiences we're trying to reach, to let them know it's safe to vote by mail, it's safe to vote in person, but get your vote counted, right?
And how is the disinformation landscape in this election different than in 2016? And then also, how is it similar?
Yeah, so I think it's different in the sense that everyone knows that we have a disinformation problem, and people are trying to there are all sorts of different solutions on the market. So the Democratic Party is doing stuff, the different committees are doing stuff, individual campaigns are doing stuff. There's a lot of other vendors out there. In a way that 2016, it was obvious that disinformation was happening to folks in the business, but it got way less coverage until after the election. So I think that's a big difference, is that you've got the media talking about it, and folks are aware that there are both foreign and domestic organizations that are trying to influence the election. So that's a big difference. And the fact that we exist and are doing like work with around 20 different clients now in the advocacy political side, that includes some level of disinformation monitoring, is a sign that folks are taking this more seriously.
Why are these tactics, these disinformation tactics and these efforts effective, right? Like, what is the impact that you guys have seen that disinformation has had on voter preferences, who to vote for, whether to vote? Do you guys have examples of, disinformation being extremely impactful on people's perceptions of, political issues?
So, there have been peer-reviewed studies on the effect of disinformation in the 2016 election, and various groups. There have been reports that have come out from even the U.S. government about how Black voters in particular are being targeted this time around with disinformation about Vice President Biden. So that those conversations and those things are happening, not just from Main Street One, but from the academic community, from governmental agencies, et cetera. So that I think is like one, the fact that we're seeing this time around, and there are like, the national disinformation is like what folks are talking about, right? But this is stuff happening in little races around the country, in state house races. Disinformation is like really effective locally, right? Because it's much cheaper and easier to spread a message in a small geography. You need much much fewer nodes to sort of influence those networks than you do in like a national election. So I think the story that will come out of this election will be less the impact of disinformation on the presidential and more the impact of disinformation on smaller races and things that we haven't seen yet because folks are not really looking.
Wow, to think, the small little aldermanic or, city council race has, a significant amount of disinformation is, really obviously eye-opening for a lot of us. And
but also part of politics forever, right, Marley? The famous story of Karl Rove when he was running somebody's Texas campaign, calling reporters in and saying that my office has been bugged by my opponent when it hadn't been, just to get the stories out there that there was a bug. I mean, all these tactics have just expanded onto the internet. So this shouldn't be a surprise for folks, right? This is, it's always been a rough and tumble game of politics in the United States, and we have a free press, and with that comes people's ability to get messages out that are untrue, and now with the internet you can scale those and you can professionalize lies in a way that was much harder to do 20-30 years ago, and that's what's scary, right? It's like people don't know where the information is coming from. It's you could stand up a web property tomorrow in a small town in Oklahoma, and just nail your opponent over display ads and have no disclosures, right? There's still so many ways around the campaign finance laws that we have set up in the United States to protect candidates.
So now that we've gotten into sort of like a gray area in terms of where social media is underperforming when it comes to our expectations of like, I guess, like social benefit, should there be a role for government regulation in, policing disinformation?
The high school libertarian in me would really be uncomfortable with the U.S. government censoring information or somehow trying to censor disinformation. Because that just to me doesn't feel like the government's role. I think certainly all these platforms have roles in making sure that there isn't hate speech and there isn't things that are endangering the lives of folks. I would say medical disinformation is you can make an argument that is actually dangerous to society. Certainly vaccination rates declining around the United States is not a sign that this disinformation that we're seeing, the conversations happening are not affecting the discourse, right? Something is causing folks to get vaccinated less, and one could connect it to these massive conversations. So I would think maybe in the public health space the government could say something, but I'd be really careful with political disinformation, because you could imagine a scenario where Donald Trump wins re-election, passes some law that says political disinformation is illegal, but obviously political disinformation means whatever they would say it meant. So do you trust regulators to be able to remain nonpartisan with that kind of power?
In the last few years, obviously you brought up some of these platforms that have updated their official policies and regarding disinformation, how they're actively combating it. Do you guys see, Main Street One is working on the ground. Do you guys see that these policies are effective at combating disinformation? Have some of the more well-known efforts, by Twitter to implement, disclosures on posts that may be misleading, or is there an adverse effect from these platforms, being as vocal as they are trying to combat it.